What if I told you that the fastest way to unlock God's blessing over your finances isn't grinding harder or chasing every trend, but protecting your integrity like it's worth more than money itself? Sounds almost foolish in a culture obsessed with shortcuts and instant success, doesn't it? Yet Nehemiah's story proves that character, not cunning, attracts divine favor you can't manufacture. Maybe you felt the tension yourself. You're working tirelessly to make money, scaling your business, and wondering why the breakthroughs seem delayed. You see others cutting corners and prospering, at least for a moment, and it tempts you to wonder if integrity still matters. Let's be clear. It matters more than ever. Because the wealth that comes without righteousness is a curse in disguise. Imagine leading a Christian business so anchored in honor that clients trust you before you ever pitch, and partners line up to invest because your reputation precedes you. This isn't a fantasy. It's exactly what Nehemiah experienced, and what you can too. When you dare to confront greed and stand for what's right, God doesn't just bless your work. He elevates it to a platform of influence. Most people think favor is random, or reserved for pastors and missionaries. But Nehemiah was a marketplace leader, a builder, a planner, an entrepreneur. His success was proof that divine provision meets practical excellence when you refuse to compromise. If you're tired of feeling like your efforts never add up, if you're ready to see supernatural doors swing open, this message will challenge everything you thought you knew about business, money, and God's economy. So lean in, because by the end of this journey, you'll discover the same secret Nehemiah carried. The integrity you guard today becomes the favor you walk in tomorrow. The foundations of Nehemiah's integrity. Nehemiah's story is a masterclass in how character outranks strategy when building a godly business. While most people obsess over clever marketing plans and investment tactics, Nehemiah began with a heart so committed to righteousness that God couldn't help but bless him. He didn't separate spiritual devotion from practical leadership. If you're serious about making money without selling your soul, you must root your ambitions in a purpose higher than profit alone. Proverbs 11:3 says, "The integrity of the upright guides them, but the unfaithful are destroyed by their duplicity." That single verse is a lighthouse for every Christian entrepreneur. Many people forget that Nehemiah wasn't a priest, he was an administrator, much like a CEO overseeing massive projects. Yet he spent days in fasting and prayer before he touched a brick. This balance of spiritual preparation and marketplace action is a blueprint for anyone wanting to run a Christian business. Before you launch a product, hire staff, or open a new branch, ask yourself if you first invited God into every detail. It's easy to think integrity is just about avoiding scandals, but it's really about welcoming God's eyes into your plans. A modern entrepreneur I mentored learned this the hard way. He rushed to scale his company before asking if his contracts reflected fairness. Within a year, profits shrank and employee trust eroded. When he paused to rebuild agreements on honesty and clarity, clients returned. Sometimes the fastest way to make money is to slow down and check your heart. That's the secret Nehemiah knew. Success is birthed in hidden places before it's seen in public. Integrity isn't only about grand gestures. Nehemiah refused to tax his people like other governors, choosing instead to cover expenses from his own wealth. That humility was magnetic. In your godly business, think practically. Are there fees you could lower? Are you paying fair wages? Even small decisions reveal what spirit is driving your enterprise. Customers can feel when a business is built on respect, not exploitation. Don't let the culture of shortcuts rob you of divine favor. Nehemiah stood out because he never traded his convictions for comfort. His commitment to purity attracted resources kings couldn't deny. If you're tempted to fudge the numbers or exaggerate your impact, remember God sees the ledger. The book of Proverbs warns, "Dishonest scales are an abomination to the Lord. Integrity will cost you something up front, but it always pays dividends that compound for eternity." When you consider Nehemiah's foundations, realize you are building your own. Maybe you're just starting your Christian business or trying to revive one that feels stuck. This is your moment to choose integrity over mere appearances. What if your next breakthrough isn't another marketing hack but a quiet, unseen commitment to honor God with every penny and every promise? Because as you'll see next, true integrity only shines brighter under pressure, resisting corruption in times of lack. It's easy to talk about integrity when your bank account is comfortable and your Christian business is thriving, but Nehemiah's story proves that real character is tested in scarcity. Imagine being surrounded by enemies, short on supplies, and under pressure to deliver results. Lesser leaders would have justified cutting corners or demanding bribes just to keep the work going. Nehemiah refused. He knew that making money at the cost of righteousness wasn't worth the hidden price. When your resources shrink, that's when your convictions must grow stronger. One day, Nehemiah faced complaints that people were mortgaging fields and selling children into slavery just to survive. He could have shrugged it off, claiming he was too busy building the wall. Instead, he confronted the lenders and demanded they stop exploiting the desperate. This is the model for any godly business owner. Protect the vulnerable even when your own profits feel fragile. Proverbs 22:16 warns, "Whoever oppresses the poor to increase his wealth will only come to poverty." Integrity in lean times plants seeds that God waters in His own season. Let's be real, scarcity tempts entrepreneurs to compromise. Maybe you've been tempted to overcharge a client or underpay a freelancer. I've seen founders justify shady practices thinking it's just for now until cash flow improves. But remember, what you tolerate when times are hard becomes your culture when times are good. Nehemiah teaches that if you want lasting favor, you must set standards that don't shift with your circumstances. If you feel pressure, that's the perfect time to cling tighter to God's promises. A practical step you can take today is to audit your contracts and expenses. Ask yourself, am I being fair to everyone involved even if it costs me more in the short term? One Christian business I advised started offering transparent pricing during a recession. Their competitors mocked them, saying it was financial suicide. But customers noticed, and their trust exploded. Sometimes the best growth strategy isn't a clever ad but an uncompromising stand for what's right. Nehemiah's resistance to corruption was a declaration of faith. He believed God would supply what integrity demanded. This isn't naive optimism, it's radical dependence. Psalm 37:25 says, "I have never seen the righteous forsaken or their children begging bread." If you're making money God's way, He will not abandon you in famine. He will raise up unexpected streams of provision when you refuse to sell out. When you think about resisting corruption, remember it's not a single decision but a daily discipline. Every invoice, every deal, every paycheck is a chance to prove you serve a higher authority. And if you stay faithful in scarcity, you'll discover something Nehemiah knew deep in his bones. Lack is never the end of the story. It's just the setup for a generosity that shocks the world. Sacrificial leadership and radical generosity. Nehemiah could have demanded the same perks and privileges as every other governor. After all, he had the title, the authority, and the excuses. But he chose sacrificial leadership, a style that seems almost absurd in today's business culture. While others fattened their pockets, Nehemiah opened his hand. He personally funded meals for hundreds of workers and refused the governor's allowance. That's not just generosity. It's a prophetic statement that making money doesn't have to mean taking more for yourself. In a Christian business, leadership must look like stewardship, not entitlement. Imagine how his staff felt watching this. They weren't manipulated by fear or guilt. They were inspired by a leader who didn't just preach integrity, he modeled it. Sacrificial leadership multiplies loyalty in ways no bonus can. Proverbs 11:25 declares, "A generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed." If you're an entrepreneur, don't underestimate the impact of covering a colleague's need, paying a supplier early, or sharing profits during lean months. Radical generosity is the currency that heaven recognizes. I once coached a founder who struggled to pay his employees on time. He started tithing faithfully and setting aside a generosity fund, even when revenues were low. Within a year, his business had doubled. Clients started arriving out of nowhere. It wasn't a fluke. It was the fruit of putting others first. Nehemiah knew that giving creates room for God to give back. In your godly business, consider what sacrificial step you could take this quarter. Maybe it's supporting a charity, forgiving a debt, or mentoring a struggling entrepreneur. Let's be honest, sacrificial leadership can feel risky. The voice of fear whispers, "What if I give too much and end up with nothing?" But that's the test. Will you trust your provision to the economy or to the King of Kings? When you hold resources with an open hand, you declare that God, not your profit margin, is your source. Remember 2 Corinthians 9:8, "And God is able to bless you abundantly so that you will abound in every good work." That promise isn't reserved for pastors, it's for every believer who dares to lead generously. Think about the statement you're making to your team, your family, and the watching world. Sacrificial generosity says, "I'm not enslaved to money, I'm entrusted with it." And there's a difference. When Nehemiah covered the cost of the workers' meals, he built credibility and community that no bribe or campaign could replicate. That's why his project succeeded against impossible odds. A godly business thrives, not because it hoards resources, but because it releases them. As you reflect on Nehemiah's example, ask yourself, where is God inviting me to be radically generous? It could be the key that unlocks new favor and unexpected partnerships, because as you'll soon discover, this kind of leadership doesn't just transform your finances, it creates a ripple effect that transforms entire cultures. The power of accountability. Nehemiah wasn't just a gifted leader, he was a transparent one. He opened his books, shared his motives, and invited scrutiny. In a world where leaders often hide behind closed doors and polished statements, Nehemiah demonstrated the power of accountability. He gathered nobles and officials and made them promise, in public, to stop exploiting the people. This wasn't a PR stunt. It was a safeguard against corruption. In your Christian business, you need this same structure. When you allow others to speak into your finances and your decisions, you disarm pride before it ever takes root. I've watched entrepreneurs resist accountability because they think it signals weakness. The opposite is true. Accountability is the backbone of strength. Proverbs 27:17 says, "As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another." If you want your godly business to last, surround yourself with people who love you enough to ask hard questions. Who can review your contracts? Who can challenge your spending? Who can remind you that making money doesn't justify cutting corners? Let's get practical. Schedule regular financial reviews with a mentor or board. Share your income statements, your cash flow projections, and your charitable giving. This level of openness feels uncomfortable at first, but it builds trust with clients, employees, and even your own conscience. One business owner I coached started quarterly transparency meetings. Within a year, his employee turnover dropped by half. People don't leave organizations, they leave dishonesty. Nehemiah's accountability inspired confidence not just among the Jews, but also in King Artaxerxes, who kept resourcing the project. Your reputation for transparency can attract investors and partners who value integrity. Think of it as a magnet. The clearer your practices, the more favor finds you. Proverbs 10:9 reminds us, "Whoever walks in integrity walks securely, but whoever takes crooked paths will be found out." Why not build a godly business so clean that no scandal can stick to it? I know some entrepreneurs think, "That sounds nice, but I can't afford that kind of openness." The truth is, you can't afford not to. In an age where digital footprints last forever, the safest strategy is radical honesty. If Nehemiah had hidden debts or taken bribes, the wall would have crumbled under suspicion. Instead, his transparency built something that lasted generations. What will your choices build? As you reflect on the power of accountability, consider this. The very safeguards you resist might be the structures that sustain you when challenges come. Because next, we'll see that integrity isn't just about transparency, it's about the courage to confront greed and injustice head-on. Courage to confront injustice and greed. Nehemiah wasn't content to quietly live with injustice. When he saw wealthy nobles charging outrageous interest and enslaving their own people, he didn't look away. He gathered the offenders and said, "What you are doing is not right. Shouldn't you walk in the fear of our God?" Nehemiah 5:9. That took courage. In any godly business, you will eventually face moments when silence feels safer than truth. But if you want divine favor, you must be willing to challenge greed, even if it costs you relationships or revenue. I've mentored founders who feared confronting toxic partners. They worried about lawsuits or bad press. But every time they compromised, their peace evaporated. Nehemiah knew that you can't build something wholly on a foundation of exploitation. Sometimes making money requires walking away from a deal that feels lucrative but smells rotten. Your integrity must set the terms, not your fear of loss. Proverbs 28:6 says, "Better the poor whose walk is blameless than the rich whose ways are perverse." That verse isn't just ancient wisdom. It's a roadmap for modern entrepreneurs. Think about your own organization. Is there a supplier who routinely cheats workers? Are you tempted to ignore unfair practices because everyone does it? Nehemiah shows us that confronting injustice is never convenient, but it's always necessary. One Christian business I advised ended a contract with a profitable but unethical partner. They lost 30% of their revenue overnight. But within 6 months, they had replaced it with clients who respected their stand. When you honor God with your courage, He honors you with provision. It helps to remember that confronting greed doesn't mean you're self-righteous. It means you care enough about your mission and the people you serve to protect them. Nehemiah could have ignored the complaints. He was already burdened with building the wall. But he understood that injustice corrodes unity faster than any external enemy. If you want a team that thrives, you must prove you'll defend them from exploitation. That credibility is worth more than any short-term profit. Practical tip: create a clear ethics policy. Share it with your employees, suppliers, and clients. Make it known that your Christian business will not tolerate dishonest gain. It doesn't have to be complicated, just consistent. Over time, you'll attract partners who share your values, and you'll repel those who don't. That clarity will save you from hidden crises down the road. When you choose the courage to confront injustice, you set your business apart as a beacon of integrity. But don't stop there, because the next step is translating conviction into daily habits that anchor your mission. And that's exactly what we'll explore next. Practical steps to build an integrity-based business today. It's one thing to admire Nehemiah's convictions. It's another to translate them into daily action. Building a godly business anchored in integrity requires deliberate, practical steps. Start by reviewing your contracts, marketing promises, and pricing. Are they clear and fair? Proverbs 16:11 says, "Honest scales and balances belong to the Lord. Even small exaggerations can erode trust." One entrepreneur I worked with rewrote all his service agreements in plain language. Clients appreciated the clarity so much that referrals increased 40% in a year. Simplicity is often the highest form of respect. Next, establish accountability systems. This doesn't have to be complicated or expensive. Create a habit of monthly financial reviews with a trusted advisor. Schedule quarterly meetings to evaluate your policies and team culture. When people see you prioritize transparency, it signals that making money isn't your only mission. It also frees you from the hidden anxiety that comes when you secretly wonder if you're cutting corners. Nehemiah thrived because his business dealings could stand in the daylight. Consider how you handle generosity. Do you have a giving strategy, or do you wait for feelings to move you? Nehemiah planned his generosity in advance, covering the costs of feeding hundreds. A wise business owner once told me, "If you don't assign your money a mission, greed will find one for you." Create a line item in your budget for sacrificial giving. Whether it's supporting a local shelter, funding missionaries, or blessing employees in need, consistent generosity is a declaration that your Christian business serves a higher purpose. Communication matters more than most leaders realize. Nehemiah constantly reminded his team why they were building. He didn't assume people would stay inspired on their own. In your business, keep your mission visible, on your walls, in your meetings, and on your website. Tell stories about moments when integrity paid off. Celebrate employees who embody your values. Making money is easier when everyone feels connected to something eternal. One practical exercise: draft a values manifesto. List the non-negotiables that define how you operate. Share it with your team and clients. This document becomes both shield and sword. It protects you from compromise and helps you lead with clarity. A godly business can't afford to drift on unspoken assumptions. As Nehemiah showed, clear convictions guide every decision. As you implement these steps, remember, integrity isn't a destination you arrive at, it's a daily practice. And when you choose to build this way, you're preparing for blessings that exceed your expectations. Because soon, you'll see that integrity's greatest reward is not just wealth, but a legacy that outlives you. The ripple effect of integrity on your finances and legacy. Nehemiah's impact didn't end when the wall was finished. His integrity created ripples that shaped generations. When you build a godly business rooted in righteousness, you're planting seeds that outlive your career. Proverbs 20:7 says, "The righteous who walks in his integrity, blessed are his children after him." Imagine your grandchildren benefiting from the decisions you make today. That's the quiet power of integrity. It transforms momentary sacrifices into generational favor. I've met entrepreneurs who think their choices only affect the next quarter's profit. But every honest invoice, every fair deal, every sacrificial gift becomes a testimony that outlasts economic trends. Years from now, your children and employees will remember whether you were a leader who chased shortcuts or a steward who trusted God's timing. Making money isn't evil. It's what you do with it and how you get it that defines your legacy. Nehemiah shows us that wealth can be both tool and testimony. Consider this. Your reputation often becomes your greatest asset. One Christian business I advised grew from a tiny operation to a national brand, not because their product was revolutionary, but because clients trusted their word. When you operate with consistent integrity, word spreads faster than any marketing campaign. Integrity compounds like interest. Slow at first, then unstoppable. That's why Nehemiah's name still inspires people thousands of years later. It also attracts provision you can't predict. While others scramble for funding through manipulation or debt traps, a godly business finds doors opening simply because people want to partner with honor. Nehemiah didn't need to beg for resources. His faithfulness made him a magnet for royal favor. The same principle applies today. When you resist compromise, you're aligning your business with heaven's supply chain. Practical tip: keep a journal of integrity milestones. Write down moments when you chose the hard right over the easy wrong. Reflect on how God showed up in those seasons. This record will strengthen your resolve when future tests come, and it becomes a legacy document, something your family and team can look back on to see God's faithfulness. As you think about the ripple effects of your choices, remember, you're not just building for yourself. You're creating a story that will inspire and convict everyone who hears it. But before you step into that legacy, there's one final key to unlock God's favor over your finances. Prayer of impartation and activation. Before you move forward, pause and invite God's presence over your business. Nehemiah didn't finish the wall by strategy alone. He built it by consecrating every step to the Lord. This prayer isn't a formality. It's an activation of divine favor that transforms ordinary plans into supernatural assignments. If you want your Christian business to thrive, you must cover it in prayer as diligently as you cover it in spreadsheets. Close your eyes, open your heart, and let these words settle into your spirit. Heavenly Father, I thank you for every person reading this right now. I declare that their desire to build a godly business pleases you. Lord, I ask that you would release wisdom beyond their education, favor beyond their qualifications, and provision beyond their calculations. Remind them that making money in integrity is not just possible, it is their inheritance as your children. Like Nehemiah, give them courage to stand apart from compromise. Lord, I ask that you would expose every hidden place in their finances where fear or greed has taken root. Shine your light on every transaction, every agreement, every ambition. Purify their motives so that their business would be a testimony of your righteousness. Just as you stirred King Artaxerxes to provide resources for Nehemiah, stir the hearts of partners, investors, and clients to pour into this work. Let supernatural connections be established even now. Father, I speak boldness over them, the kind that confronts injustice and defends the weak. Make them leaders who steward influence with humility and courage. Where they feel small, remind them that you are big. Where they feel unqualified, remind them that you are the one who calls and equips. I break every lie that says they must compromise to survive. You are Jehovah Jireh, their provider. Holy Spirit, I ask for fresh vision. Let them see their enterprise not only as a way to make money, but as a platform to advance your kingdom. Fill them with creative ideas, inspired strategies, and unshakable integrity. Multiply the work of their hands. Cause their business to be a lighthouse in the marketplace, drawing people to your goodness. And finally, Lord, I seal this prayer with faith. I declare that every seed of integrity sown today will reap a harvest of lasting impact. May their children and their children's children walk in the blessings that come from this obedience. In the mighty name of Jesus, amen. Now that you've seen Nehemiah's blueprint, the question isn't whether integrity matters, but whether you'll choose it when no one is watching. Will you dare to run your Christian business in a way that makes heaven proud, even when the world calls you naive? What would happen if you decided today that your finances, your contracts, and your leadership would reflect God's character more than your own ambition? Can you imagine the favor that would start to chase you down? Clients arriving unannounced, opportunities multiplying, and peace filling every corner of your work? Have you asked yourself what legacy you're building? Because every decision you make, every hidden compromise you refuse, writes a story your children will one day tell. Isn't it time to create a story worth repeating? Write in the comments, "My finances will glorify God." And watch how this powerful declaration begins to shift the course of your business and your finances from this day forward. If this message stirred something in you, don't let it fade when the video ends. Take one action today. One act of radical honesty, one step of sacrificial generosity, one moment of courageous accountability. Watch how God honors it. If this word spoke to your heart, would you consider supporting our ministry through the link in the description? Your partnership helps us keep sharing these truths that set people free. And if you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another teaching that could transform your business and your life.